Casey Joyner right now about this week's NFL games, including tonight's Thursday night football matchup between the Bills and the Jets. And, Casey, right off the bat, this is desperation. One of these teams is going to be 0-2, and in that AFC race, the 0-2 team, they could say sayonara to the 2016 season.
They might want to say sayonara in any event, but yeah, they could say sayonara to the season. And if Buffalo goes 0-2, if you're Ryan, you're thinking, well, he could say sayonara to his job. I think if the Jets have a struggle of the season, they're not going to make any changes at the top. But if Rex Ryan has any troubles this year, yeah, things could go south for him in a hurry. And the thing is he's also got a banged-up wide receiver in Watkins, and if Watkins is out of that offense, they don't have a passing game, and so, things could go south in a big-time hurry if things start going bad.
Yeah, the Jets, the Bills are a team that last week just the 7 points against Baltimore. Tyrod Taylor got some big money. They got some names. McCoy, Watkins, a fourth pick in the draft. It just hasn't worked out for them. How do they match up with this Jets team, which a lot of people thought was a playoff team here? And they should have won a game last week at home. I thought they really coughed one up against a pretty good team, but that's a team that added a lot of pieces this offseason, and people consider it a playoff team. So how do you match these two teams up today? Because, Buffalo, without Watkins potentially, I don't know that defensively they're as strong as they were the last couple of years, specifically when Jim Schwartz was there.
No, and if the Jets it says something about them that they didn't go for it, whether they had a 4th and 1 and they decided to kick a field goal and they played it safe. And if they score a touchdown there, because Fitzpatrick had rushed and came up a half yard short, and then they ran it the next play and they didn't go for touchdown or field goal. So you play it safe, and yeah, you lose a game at home against a team that you might be competing for a playoff spot later. So let's hope that's not what they're going to do. But the Jets still ranked 8th last week in my good blocking rate metric that says how often an offensive line gives its ball carriers good run blocking. So they've got their running game going. Buffalo's defense did not fare particularly well against the run last week. So I think the Jets are going to be able to pound the ball. And Buffalo, even though they are also ranked tied for 8th in good blocking rate, again, if they don't have Watkins, they literally do not have a passing game. So if he can fight through the pain, they'll be able to hit some big passes. But if he can't fight through the pain, it's going to be something. I'll be looking at a Watkins versus Revis matchup to see if Revis plays as badly as he did last week. If he does, Watkins, if he fights through that pain, he could put up some highlight reel plays this week.
Casey Joyner's with us. Tonight's game is on 97.3 ESPN. It's the Jets and the Bills. Somebody's going 0-2, the loser of that one. Let's dive into some of the other matchups. I like some of this. I think the schedule's okay this week. It's not great, but it starts off at 1 o'clock with a really good one. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, really in that AFC North there. It could be a potential winner. It could be get a big leg up in the division.
Yeah, the thing about Pittsburgh is as much as their passing game gets lauded, and mind you, they lose Bryant and they lose Wheaton, and Sammy Coates is still able to go out there and hit big plays in the passing game, and they got Rodgers. It's like they just, and mind you, they'd be even better if Wheaton comes back. So they just find ways to get the deep pass going. As great as their passing game is, though, they rank 3rd in good blocking rate last week. Having Pouncey back is huge for the offensive line. And so with the Steelers, you can't sit back and say, hey, we're going to sit back and stop the pass, because they'll get good blocking on 50% of their running plays, and with the league average being like 35%, it's the kind of thing where, to put that in perspective, if you get a 50% good blocking rate, that means that every other play you're probably going to average 7.5 yards per rushing play. The Steelers will kill you on the ground as much as they'll kill you through the air. So I think that's a 1-2 punch that Cincinnati is going to have some problems with.
Yeah, and, I thought you got a chance to see Pittsburgh in primetime the other night with that offense, and obviously scored a lot of points, made Washington, look pretty silly the other night. We'll get into Washington in a bit. Some other interesting games. Well, let's go to Washington. They're playing Dallas at 1 o'clock. So inside that division, loser of that game's 0-2.
Yeah, they are. And the thing about Dallas last week was, Prescott threw 15 vertical passes. He just didn't throw many of them to Dez Bryant. So they need to have Prescott throwing more passes to Dez Bryant. But the big standout when I broke down that game was Dallas's offensive line had good blocking rate 41.9% of the time. Ranked 11th. It's actually higher than they had last year in good blocking rate. So the blocking was good. Ezekiel Elliott averaged 4.5 yards per carry on good blocking plays. that's abysmal. The league average was 7.5 last week. It was 8.1 last year. I mean, Zeke he didn't do anything on the ground, even when he had good blocking. So he needs to step it up, and he even has admitted that, he didn't play as well as he would have liked. So he needs to step it up and get it up to the next level, because if he doesn't, that's why you might be seeing more of Alfred Morris in the lineup. You might be seeing Dallas not going to quite that bell cow setup, because Zeke really didn't have a good game last week.
Yeah, and you wrote about this. What were some of the main issues there? Is that him? Because a lot of times, their line very lauded. Many people think it's the best in football. We saw them perform with DeMarco Murray. I don't think they, last year they didn't have that standout back, but they still had some backs that put up some decent yardage, specifically McFadden. Was this a byproduct of Elliott struggling, the line struggling, or can he? Is he not a good fit behind that line? What do you think?
I think he looked a bit tentative, and I also think that defensively the Giants didn't have to, even though Prescott was throwing vertical passes, he wasn't being that successful, and they were shutting down Bryant. So even when the Cowboys' offensive line was able to give Elliott good run blocking, you're able to get the safeties up close enough to the line to where, great, we've got good run blocking, and now instead of getting a 10, 15-yard gain, he's getting a 5-yard gain, which, those are nice, but you really want to get the big chunks of yards. So I think they're going to have to get more success downfield, and they're going to have to get Bryant involved in the game. And also Elliott's going to have to stop looking so tentative. I think he just looked he wasn't hitting a hole at quite full speed. It's not, he doesn't lack for toughness. I mean, it's not that. I really think it's just a matter of his first NFL game, the speed of the defenses, and it was just having to adjust to the game. I think he'll adjust, and I think he'll do better, but he has to, because if he doesn't, the Cowboys are going to have to do something else.
Do you, this game's in Washington. Let me ask you, Dallas is on the road. Did you see enough from Washington the other night to think that they can bounce back, or do you like Dallas to be able to go on the road and win this game?
Pittsburgh's going to do what they did on Monday night to a lot of teams this year. I mean, that's a really good team. That's a phenomenal offense. I mean, they struggled. Well, they were down, I believe it was 6-0, 5 minutes into the second quarter. My son's a big Steelers fan. He's sitting there watching the game like, it's over. He's like, throwing things around. He's so upset. And it's like, dude, this is the Steelers. Give them a chance. And the Steelers scored 30-some-odd points for the rest of the game. I mean, that's what they can do. Like, if you shut them down for a quarter, that's not going to stand up. So Washington, that said more about what Pittsburgh was than what Washington was. I think Washington's going to get better. I don't think they're going to do as bad in run blocking as they did last week, because they had a 23.1% good blocking rate last week. It was ranked 30th in the league, so they're a lot better than that. Again, that says something about Pittsburgh's defense. I think Washington runs the ball better. I think they get Jackson, even though he was involved, I think they're going to be more involved in the vertical game. I think they throw a lot of passes to Reed. I think they've got more offensive weaponry than Dallas does. Even with Elliott and Bryant, and I think that gives Washington an edge.
All right, Casey Joyner's with us, ESPN.com, NFL Insider, looking at all the Week 2 games that matter here, the big ones that stand out. I love this game, Kansas City and Houston. I really like the matchup. Great defenses. I said this yesterday, I think they're under-the-radar Super Bowl contenders. My producer kind of gave me a look like, you're out of your mind. But I think these two teams, not enough people are talking about.
Now, Houston, look at Will Fuller. Last week, Will Fuller had more targets, more receptions, and more yards than DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, this is a rookie in his first game, and yeah, he played really well in college, but he outplayed DeAndre Hopkins last week. And Hopkins had a good game. It's not like Hopkins did terrible. Hopkins had a good game, but Fuller did that well. So now, if you're Houston, now you've got Hopkins, you've got Fuller, and you've got Lamar Miller, who looked really great who looked good last week, even though Houston only had good blocking 35% of their plays, which wasn't very good. So Houston's run blocking can be even better. You've got that kind of setup. That's great. But Kansas City also showed they can throw the football, and Kansas City had the best good blocking rate in the league last week, which is just that goes from last year where they ranked, I think, second in that category. So that's not an anomaly that's par for the course. So problem with Kansas City, though, is that Charles is hurt. Now Ware might be hurt. Now they're getting down to West, and that's great to have that much depth. But if you're getting down to your third running back, I think they're still going to be productive. But if your third running back gets hurt, now what do you do? So Kansas City needs to get healthy in their backfield.
I really like that game. I'm interested in seeing those two coaches. I like Bill O'Brien, Andy Reid, obviously know him well here. That should be a lot of fun. Casey Joyner's with us, looking at all the top Week 2 matchups. Intrigued by Tampa, Arizona. I thought Arizona just looked pedestrian the other night. I mean, how do you lose that game at home if you're a Super Bowl contender? No Gronk, no Garoppolo. And now this Tampa team, I think is scrappy, and teams are not going to want to play this team, and Winston seems like he's now a weapon. I find that this game is a big one for Tampa to kind of say, hey, we're here in the NFC. You're going to have to contend with us this year.
No quarterback threw more vertical passes last year than Jameis Winston. He's a downfield thrower. He threw a lot of risky passes. He had the highest bad decision rate in the league, which is a metric I have that measures how often a quarterback makes a mental error that leads to a turnover opportunity for the other team. So he takes a lot of chances. But, okay, so does Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer's always been very poorly rated in that category as well. And Tampa has... You're talking, they've got Sims, who scored a touchdown on a great play last week. They've got Martin. They've got Evans. I mean, they've got some targets. Even Safarian Jenkins only catches one pass last week and hasn't played to his talent level. Is a great catch for a 30-yard touchdown. So they've got some weaponry. Their problem is they've got a terrible set of safeties, and their defense is not good, and they're going to get into a lot of shootouts. But the shootout games are, you can go, if you play a shootout game, you can go play in Arizona and beat them because shootouts are always 50-50 propositions. So Arizona could be looking at 0-2 this week.
Casey, you look at this one between Jacksonville and San Diego. San Diego coughed one up last week, letting Kansas City win that game. Jacksonville gave a scare to Green Bay, but now they got to travel across the country. And I guess we'll find out a little bit if Jacksonville's for real. I think, memory serves, I think you might have picked them to win that division. I
did, and you should see an article tomorrow on ESPN's Insider section about Jacksonville still being a playoff contender. I think they'll make the playoffs even if they don't win the division. The thing for Jacksonville is they've got one of the best vertical passes in Bortles. You look at his numbers; he was top 5 in vertical and stretch vertical yards per attempt last year. Allen Robinson, only 2 receivers had more vertical yards last year than Allen Robinson. That was Antonio Brown and Julio Jones. That's the kind of company he keeps. Wow. Hearns was top 12 in both vertical and stretch vertical yards per attempt. Julius Thomas is a very good tight end. They've got a really good 1-2 combination in their backfield, assuming Chris Ivory comes back from his ailment. They've stockpiled a ton of good defensive talent, so I think Jacksonville is a strong team waiting to happen, and I think San Diego losing Keenan Allen, their offense really fell apart after he left.
Feel bad for that kid. He got off to a great start last year, then gets hurt, and then what do you have, a lacerated kidney or something last year, and then the ACL tear this year. Just an awful story for talent. Casey, let's look at a couple more matchups here. Indianapolis, Denver. I find Indy to be interesting because of luck, but that's not a very good roster outside of him. And then Denver with Trevor Siemian, it's like, okay, he burst on the scene. Can he follow that up? But this is a big game for Indianapolis.
It is, and the Colts, mind you, they've got some really good players in a number of positions, but there's not a team, I think, that if you look at each level of their team, you say, okay, besides quarterback, you go offensive line, receiver, running back, a defensive line, linebacker, secondary. You can go every position and go, I've got some good players, but, man, they've got a hole in each one of those positions. They've got significant weaknesses everywhere. And they're just not a team that handles power football very well. So I think they're going to be able to put up some plays against Denver, but Denver plays a brand of football that the Colts will not match up well with. So I think Colts are going to go 0-2 this week, and that's that's a big hole for them, even in what's a weak division. You can't be going 0-2 with Houston the way they're playing.
No, and a lot of teams that had some aspirations have 0-2 looks in the mirror right at them here. Let's go to Minnesota as at home. A lot of indications that it will be Sam Bradford, and you wrote about how Bradford can help Peterson out, who had a poor game last week, yet they still won. This is a different challenge playing Green Bay.
It is a different challenge. The thing is, though, is that Minnesota had good blocking on running plays only 18.5% of the time. That was dead last in the league by far, and that was less than half of what the good blocking rate was last year. I think a lot of it just came down to Sean Hill's under center, and the defense goes, look, we just have no respect for your passing game at all, so we're just going to sit in here and load 8-9 in the box and make you try and beat us. And Minnesota still wins that game, but that's not a situation that you want to be faced. You can't win if you're getting an 18.5% good blocking rate. I don't care if you get Adrian Peterson in the back or not. You're not going to win many games if you don't improve that number. So I think having Bradford will improve that number pretty significantly. And Green Bay, here's the thing about Green Bay. Jordy Nelson returns last week, and he scores the touchdown. So he says, Jordy Nelson's back. 9 targets thrown his way. 6 of them were short passes. 3 were vertical passes. 1 of them was to touchdown, but none were stretch vertical. Stretch vertical is when you're throwing 20 more yards downfield. that's Nelson's. That's where he makes his impact. I mean, if he's only getting 3 vertical passes and no stretch vertical passes, if that continues every week, he's not going to help that offense. And Green Bay is going to be. They aren't going to get back to where they were a couple years ago.
All right, here's one. Let's go back to look at New York and New Orleans. These two teams played last year, and you and I probably could have found the end zone at somehow, some way in that game. Those defenses were atrocious. Will this game be different?
I think it's going to be one of the more entertaining games. The week could be 35-31, something along those lines. You see a ton of points. New Orleans has a problem in that they lost Rowe, their best cornerback. He fractured a leg. I think he's going to be out for 6 weeks as the report. So he was the only good player in the secondary. There's nobody else they have in their secondary at all is any good. And the Giants have more talent in their secondary. And as great as New Orleans passing game is, I just think that you've got to be able to slow down teams some. So I think it's going to be a lot like the last time these two teams played. I think the Giants this time are going to be able to pull that one out because I just think they've got more talent on the defensive side of the ball, and it's going to be the difference.
Casey Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider. We're breaking down the top week 2 games, and those are some of the top ones here. And then we get into Monday night, and we'll dive into this game more with Casey on Monday's show. But, this Bears team, let's take a little deeper look at where you think this is a good matchup for the Philly offense against that Bears defense, because one area that seems like the Bears struggle is in that secondary. So is that a spot you think the Eagles can exploit Monday night?
I think they can, although it's hit or miss. Chicago's banged up in the secondary, but when their corners are healthy and they play to their talent level, they're a really tough matchup. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, Wentz played really well last week. We talked earlier this week about how he threw a lot of vertical passes, didn't have any bad decisions, and he was very safe with the ball, even when he was taking downfield throws. So that's a big plus. But I want to see if he's going to be able to do that against a better set of cornerbacks. So, again, they're banged up, so Chicago may not be quite to their usual level, but they're not going to be at Cleveland's level. I do want to see Philadelphia. They'll run the ball better, 21st in good blocking rate last week. They're capable of better because they were a top 5 team in that category last year.
Here's one. You look at the linebacking change that the Bears made. This is a team that has a history of great linebackers. They made a concerted effort this week to go out, this year, we should say, to go out and get some new linebackers. Can the Eagles, because Doug Peterson said today that they want to really feed the ball to Ryan Matthews. Is that a good recipe?
Chicago held Houston to a 35.3% good blocking rate last week, ranked 23rd in the league. So they were able to shut the run down last week against a team that Houston again. They've got a good run blocking offensive line and a good running back. So I think Philadelphia will be able to do it, but it's going to come down to can you exploit those matchups? Can you throw the football? Can Wentz do what he did last week? Because if I'm Chicago, I'm saying, look, you did it against Cleveland, that's great, but do that against us. Do it against a better team. And I still think Wentz is capable of it, but I want to see it. So it's one of those where I'm hedging my bets there going, I think Wentz is going to be able to hit some of the bigger passes, but I still want to see it because if he can't, I think Philadelphia's running game is going to be hamstrung.
How about losing Ertz? Burton had a good camp, but Ertz, to me, made 2 of the bigger plays in that game against the Bears. But I thought the Bears linebackers, Freeman, who they just brought in, and Trevathan, who I thought they both did a really good job in that game against Houston, specifically in pass coverage.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, is that Ertz this past week had 8 targets. He only had 2 vertical targets, though. So actually only had 7 targets because one of them was a throwaway pass. So 7 targets go his way, and only 2 of them are vertical. So can you replace dink and dunk passes? Not really concerned about replacing dink and dunk passes. Those are easy to replace, and he was somewhat productive on those plays, but not incredibly productive. So I think they can replicate what they did. But the point is when you're talking Eagles offense, they want to be able to utilize their tight end on those vertical passes some more. So can they still get a couple of big plays out of their tight end? Yeah, but if I'm Chicago, I'm a heck of a lot less worried about that part of the game, which means you can spend more attention on the outside receiver. So again, it's one of those where I think the Eagles may just have to say, we're going to make a big play to our tight end early and make you guys respect this, because if they don't make Chicago respect this, I think Chicago's just going to start dictating pace.
Let me flip it on the other side. Defense, Philadelphia, that front 4, Cox is a handful. Logan had a good game. You look at Curry, Graham, Barwin, those 3 guys can get to the quarterback. How do they match up with that Bears offensive line, which seems like they struggle yet again this year?
One concern I have for Philadelphia is they had a really good blocking rate last week, or good blocking rate allowed, 35.3%. Cleveland ranked 23rd in the league, so Philadelphia did really well there. But Cleveland racked up 13 yards per attempt when they got good blocking. That was the highest amount in the league. So what Philadelphia needs to do is not only say we're going to be able to stop the running game when the other team is running the football, we're going to keep you from getting off those big gainers. Good news for them, Jeremy Langford, Bears' top running back, he ranked dead last in the league last year in good blocking yards per attempt, and his number this past week wasn't any better than it was last year. So I don't think the Eagles have a lot to worry about as far as giving up a big breakaway run, but it's something they need to be concerned about, because if they let Langford start getting off some of those breakaway runs, it's going to change the dynamic.
Hey, the Eagles secondary is going to lose McKelvin, Alshon Jeffries, Kevin White. Kind of a rookie. He got drafted last year, missed the whole year. Cutler, losing McKelvin. The Eagles aren't stacked in that secondary. They had a decent week, but they had the two bonehead play. Well, really the one bonehead play where the three guys were kind of Manny, Mo, and Jack sitting in the secondary. I thought Pryor made just a great catch on Carroll. I thought Carroll had good coverage as Pryor made a good catch, but Alshon Jeffrey, he's a big, tall receiver. You wonder how the Eagles secondary will match up with this Bears offense.
Yeah, I am concerned about that, because McKelvin is a guy who can be a matchup guy. If you wanted to go shadow him on somebody, you could do it, and or you could take his side of the field and say, I can man this part of the coverage. He had a lot of terrific metrics last year. The percentage of good coverage, yards per attempt. I mean, he did well in a number of metrics, and it's not something that's easily replaceable. The thing about Jeffrey, though, is you look at his metrics over the past couple of years, he's a volume guy. He's not a guy who usually hits a lot of big plays. You can throw 150 passes to him, and he's going to be as productive on pass 150 as he is on pass number 1. So the Eagles need to say, look, Jeffries, don't hit a big play against us. We make sure our coverage is, we're not having any coverage errors downfield. They had one last week, and it was on a short pass, so they were good there. But if they can say, we're going to prevent the easy big plays to Jeffrey, and fine, you can throw, if you want to throw 10, 12 passes this way, and he's catch, a bunch of them short passes and not do much with them, okay, we can live with that, just as long as you don't let him over the top, which I think they'll be able to do.
Casey Joyner will give his pick on that game Monday when he appears on the Sports Bash. We'll let him dive into some more Bears-Eagles stuff in that game Monday night. We'll get his pick and break down this game a little bit more here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, Thursday Night Football tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. Who wins tonight, Kay?
I got the Jets. I think Buffalo is just they're too banged up, and the Jets have more talent across the board. I think unless Sammy Watkins comes out and has a big game for Buffalo, I think it's going to be a road win for the Jets.
All right, we missed you front row the other night. WWE, John Cena came out, the roof blew off.
Yeah, I saw that. It was Cena. Yeah, and so it's an awesome setup, man. And hey, now we get AJ Styles as a SmackDown champion.
Sitting right next to me, one Eagles defensive end, Vinny Curry, by the way, who's a big WWE fan. He was there sitting next to me, and it was a great show. I know, and Casey covers the WWE for the new WWE on ESPN at ESPN.com. So. Good stuff there. It was a great show. And coming back to Philly, December 12th, I think, for Raw. So, of course,
you will be front row.
Hopefully. They're very kind to give me tickets. They've given me tickets in the past. Never was I front row. That was really cool. So I do appreciate the WWE for that. But, Casey, always good to catch up with you, pal. We'll talk to you Monday. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games.
You too. I appreciate it.